Did you know that your thoughts and negative emotions and immune system plays a tremendously big role in the reason why you don't recover from irritable bowel syndrome? Hi, my name is Evette Rose, author and founder of Metaphysical Anatomy, which is a book of 679 medical ailments and also the hidden emotional messages behind them that we all share universally. And welcome to today's session where I will be talking about irritable bowel syndrome, also known as IBS. Let's start off first with what is IBS? This is a gut digestive problem that includes like abdominal pain and also changes in the pattern of bowel movements. And this can also happen without any obvious root causes. And these symptoms can come and go and even stay for long periods of time. Now, common symptoms are normally like diarrhea, constipation as well. Now, disorders as well, such as anxiety and depression and chronic fatigue syndrome, tend to be common ailments that are also accompanied by IBS, which is very interesting as they are all related to a challenged immune system. Now, what depletes the immune system? What can throw it out of whack? Normally, it's trauma. And normally unresolved trauma from, say, your childhood or something that happened more recently. Now, here also remember in my research that I also teach that trauma can be a result of long-term stress. It doesn't have to be something that happened immediately or something that was catastrophic. It could also be stress that built up in the body and the mind, starts to program itself with negative thoughts, as well as because of the result of stress. So just here on a side note, this is just perhaps your rational mind trying to make sense of how you feel. And your body is then trying to cope and to process your emotions. However, it turns into negative, destructive thoughts as no plausible solution is found for feeling the way that you do. So then the physical body reaches perhaps coping mechanisms and its capacity to manage and deal with stress, especially if it's very low level. You have an awareness to feel stressed, but there's a part of it that doesn't quite know why. So you see how this cycle can take a mental and psychological toll on you if the cycle now starts to loop without a successful reset. So when you are in a state of distress, the amygdala, also what I would call the panic button, reacts to stimuli in your environment. And that can trigger stress responses. Now this happens when your RAS, which is the reticular activating system in your brain, that takes what you focus on and it creates now a filter for that so that you focus on possible threats, so challenges or danger. Then that is what you start to focus on. And you focus on it more and more and more. So, and the reason for that is because that's where your RAS is set on. So let's take an example here. Have you noticed that when you are in pain, then that is basically all that you see in your life, reinforcing feelings of pain within you. But when you're happy, life looks great, right? Suddenly you start to see and you have awareness of positive things around you. Now, in the case of IBS, the fight or flight system is always on alert. And it switches on and off depending on what kind of subconscious trauma and memory was triggered in your body as a result of your RIS. Now, hence why you might also have diarrhea and then constipation. It switches. Now, I'll get deeper into the psychosomatic explanation of this in a minute, as it is strongly connected to your survival state of fight or flight. Now, coming back to your RAS here, which is subconsciously now set on always perhaps say danger or threats or stressful people or events. And the reason for this is that you have perhaps locked in trauma in the body, which means that there's a traumatic or stressful moments in your past that caused you so much stress that the body was too overwhelmed to deal with the stress. And this stress then becomes locked into the body's cellular memory. not just the subconscious mind, but the emotional body. Now, this body is always subconsciously perhaps expecting a verbal or a physical threat, that could take place at any given moment, depending on what your dominant trauma is that gets triggered when your IBS gets triggered. And remember, this can be subconscious. So when your RAS filters in something from your environment that could match how you feel consciously or subconsciously, then the stress response is triggered. So you perhaps feel always a sense of hypervigilance, and you don't know why. Sounds familiar? So your RAS is then set on only feeding in information from your environment that could pose as a threat, and everything else that could be positive is filtered out. And then your panic button, the amygdala, sends the stress signals to your hypothalamus, which is also the control center of your body. Now it's activating the autonomic nervous system. And there you have the fight or flight state triggered. Now here, keep in mind that when you experience stress, your stress hormone cycle is also triggered as well, releasing cortisol in the body. And this stress cycle takes at least 20 minutes to calm down and to switch off again. Now, in most cases, you are already hypervigilant and sensitive to stress in your environment because of built-up stress over time, or it could be due to a traumatic event. Now, chances are that this stress cycle never fully resets, which leaves the body in a state that I would call silent stress, depleting the physical body and also its resources to the point where your body starts to pull resources and energy from other parts of the body and organs, weakening their functioning and causing even more secondary ailments to the first initial problem. So you see, in this case, constipation can, for example, be set off when you feel emotionally or very stressed by threatened circumstances or situation of people in your environment that cause you to feel unsafe. Because perhaps of something that happened which triggered now a deep subconscious memory. Because what happened in your environment, in your immediate present life, might not have been as severe. However, it had a slight tinge that was strong enough to trigger a similar memory in your subconscious mind that was more stressful and more traumatic. And that memory is now being triggered. And what happens is that your body biochemically is reacting as if though the trauma is taking place again. And as you know now, something as simple as your thoughts could have triggered this too. So if you have diarrhea, then it's normally the running away instinct which is triggered. That is now a part of you that wants to escape or remove yourself from very upsetting or stressful circumstances. And then of course, it's the same almost with constipation. Your negative thoughts can here play a very big role. So also remember, right, talked about the immune system. Now, why do I even bring up the immune system into play here? You see, your immune system is connected to your health, gut as well. So if all of these components are stressed, if your immune system is stressed and out of balance and unhealthy, then your gut's going to suffer, depending on the activation of the fight or flight instinct. Now, normally constipation would be the freeze instinct or the actual hide instinct, or diarrhea would be connected to the fight or flight. So here now, your immune system suffers, and your psychological state also suffers. And your thoughts have a direct impact on the pain and also the cramps that you have in your body. Let me explain. So now I'm bringing in a slight plot twist in this explanation to help to give you a deeper understanding. You digest your emotions with your food. And if you think this is funny, then I have an explanation for you. When you, for example, think of a thought, now in this case, a negative thought that was perhaps triggered by someone close to you, and it set off negative emotions and thoughts. These negative thoughts are now brought to life by your brain, firing off neural pathways, sparking off electromagnetic fields, which holds the frequency of your negative thoughts, which was sparked off by your inner expressed emotional stress responses that could have been triggered now by a person or, say, your environment. Now, I'm sure that you're familiar with by now that electromagnetic fields hold and transmission intended frequency. Now, in this case, your negative thought and emotion and electromagnetic fields can manipulate matter. This is one of the most dominant theories in research in my healing technique, Metaphysical Anatomy Technique. So remember now, electromagnetic fields can manipulate matter, and your body and your tissue is made of particle matter. So this negativity becomes trapped in your digestive system as the food is programmed with your negative thoughts. Food is also matter. And then pushed down into your digestive system, which is also part of matter. And then you also have neurons in your digestive tract that reads and also feels the negative messages also held in the food that you digested. So this brings me to the external factors. Now, this explanation is also true for someone who prepares your food. Let's say have you noticed that how you can sometimes eat the same type of meal prepared by two different people and have a completely different emotional experience afterwards? Including now in the case, for example, in the company that you had when you ate your food. Because if someone is preparing your food at home, and just here, side note, this also includes you as well, right? And then also now, say for example, you also had other people who are perhaps thinking negative thoughts, and you end up digesting the negative emotions and the thoughts that were transmitted to the food back into your digestive system. Now, not everyone gets affected by this. And the reason is it depends on your threshold and your sensitivity and how much of an empath you are. So here now, how do you also, for example, know, right? How do you, for example, know that these thoughts and emotions are held in electromagnetic fields and it affects your gut? It's because of the vagus nerve that's combined with sensory nerves and also communicating information back and forth. Okay, so the vagus nerve here now plays an extremely important role as a communicator and a connector between your brain and your gut microbiome. So if your emotions change, so does your gut flora. And when your gut flora is influenced with negative emotions and thoughts, the functioning of your digestive system will be affected because it has a direct influence on your gut microbiome. And now your gut is also connected to your immune system. So just a small word of advice, try meditating before eating. So now let's move on to the emotional body and also psychological programming that takes place early in your life and also a recent perhaps buildup of that. Because as you now know, there is a strong relationship between emotional stress and how it also connects you and becomes associated as a memory in your subconscious mind and your physical body, which then responds to and reacts to your environment and your relationship interactions. So in this case, the impact that your psychological stress can have on certain areas of your body, also depending on the type of emotion and the intensity of that you energize. Now it could be that you're either suppressing it or you could be very well consciously aware of it. So here in this case, if you have IBS, then you might have felt suppressed in everything that you tried to accomplish, as you either had competitive people around you or people who didn't fully support or understand your goals and cause you perhaps to feel incompetent in your life. So here influential people perhaps also did not give you the support and the validation that you needed in order to really truly safely express yourself. And you also feel held back as you perhaps didn't know how far does your permission stretch to venture outside of family values and the belief system. Also remember here that IBS is all about the gut, the digestive system, and we hold and store family dynamic and stress in the gut. So if there's an upset or a disruption in your family, it's going to reflect in your gut. Now, here, for example, also, because perhaps in the past when you expressed certain values, you experienced a great deal of opposition, lack of support, or even criticism with the intention to perhaps control you when you were in a very vulnerable state of mind, which of course serves another person's agenda and not necessarily your own. So here you might also want to make changes in your life, and also your conscious mind is showing you everything as to why you should be making these changes. However, your subconscious mind and all the familiarity of the challenges and the struggles that you've had, now they might actually tell you a different story. And it also perhaps shows a different way forward, and that is to stay exactly where you are. Even though you are perhaps so deeply unhappy with your circumstances, and the unhappiness that you are feeling is perhaps not enough to propel you forward to take a leap of faith and to take a risk in the name of freedom and liberation for your soul and your sense of self. Hence the symptoms of this condition as well. I mean, it's like mulling and regurgitating the past over and over again. How could I have done things differently? How did I get to this point in my life? And despite the anger that you feel, perhaps that you know that you're feeling, perhaps you felt powerless to express your anger for example, in the past. Your opinion might not have been received very well by others, and it had consequences. And often the common punishment that would follow is abandonment and rejection. And let's be honest, no one likes to be rejected or feel abandoned. And your good intentions are abused and perhaps used by people whose approval you continue to search for. But ultimately, it does beg the question, which parents' love and approval do you actually still need? Remember that people, for example, in your life are only symptoms and part of an experience and an expression that you're having, which is mirroring your past. They're also showing you what you, for example, have not resolved yet. And you might be holding on to all your negative experiences in this life, and it's being held in your digestive tract. Now, this could also perhaps be the result of childhood, where influential people never had enough time or patience for you to even listen to you or perhaps acknowledge you. And you're holding on to what you want to just say in case you just have an opportunity to express it one day. Now, in most cases, you probably have experienced also a childhood where you had to learn how to cope and to fend for yourself. And this might have caused you to feel utterly unsupported, very unloved, worthless, and lonely. And there could perhaps be no one to reach out to you. And you are afraid of life, right? Afraid of what life has in store for you. You don't trust it because what will happen next? So here, perhaps you could also feel that you are desperate to be in control of everything, as it gives you the illusion of feeling at least safe amongst mental and emotional chaos. Now, here also, as you might have noticed, that needing to be in control of everything is almost like an overcompensation for the lack of control that you were able to exercise in your past. Now, ultimately, being in control does not necessarily give you the safety that you are searching for as quickly as you need it. Because perhaps you've come to realize that many things can go wrong that is well outside of your scope of control. You could also have stepped away from your own goals as you feel, what's the use, right? It's all just too hard. You're isolating yourself as a result because there's never support. Now, this can also cause you to feel perhaps anxious and also very depressed, as ultimately all that you want to feel is comfort and to feel safe, as this for example, sets a strong foundation for you to feel and be open and feeling vulnerable. Right? There's a part of you that really wants to open your heart again, which is to experience a beautiful sense of connection. However, connection never felt safe. Now remember, it's also as humans, right? We have a natural instinct to always be close to one another. And it's a survival instinct that has served for many people for thousands of years. And you might have also been thrown at the deep end here. Right? This could have left you with a feeling or a sense that you will never survive or cope in these circumstances, and there's no way out. You could perhaps here feel as a result of that as well, unsettled and unsafe in your life. And this condition perhaps starts when the person feels very suppressed, attacked, or poisoned by circumstances and also influential people around you. So now let's look at IBS diarrhea and also the emotional psychosomatic patterns behind this. Because this might actually indicate that you have an intense and stressful relationship, perhaps with your mother or father. And the consequences of this has a ripple effect into your current close relationships. And this pattern, right, the pattern and the stress that you had with your parents is now repeating itself in your current personal or professional relationships. And you perhaps could often feel under attack or abused or rejected by authority figures when all that you needed was to feel safe and secure. Now, it's almost like being in love or attached to someone or something or circumstances that are not healthy for you. And you want to run away and escape from it, yet you feel that you can't as your family values are holding you back. And also when you needed to feel safe, you were perhaps often greeted with rejection. You could have perhaps been meted or greeted with punishment. So now the fear that you have for people with whom you should feel safe has now set a strong predisposition to be overly careful, overly vigilant. And there's perhaps also an urgency to get away from toxic people and relationships, yet perhaps you have no plan of action in mind. Now, what makes this condition worse is that you might not have made a solid and clear decision as to what your way forward is going to be. How are you going to deal with your circumstances? How are you going to change it? Do you want to stay or do you want it to change? Or do you want to leave? Now, once you've made a decision, you will already feel a sense of peace setting in, because only then can you start to make plans for the future. But it also has to start with a decision. Now, let's look at IBS and when the symptoms are constipation. So the emotional and psychosomatics behind this could be that this might indicate that you've experienced perhaps abuse or very hostile actions from those around you that you relied on for survival. And this could normally be especially during infancy stages or during your greatest time of need during your adult life. You could also be holding on perhaps to negative experiences as a result of abuse and hostility. And you might also have a subconscious fear of letting go of the trauma because it could actually cause old cycles now to surface again. And you've learned how to survive and also here to keep yourself safe during emotionally and physically even challenging circumstances. Now it could be that you don't want to let go of the survival skills that you've honed in on and perfected. And talk about feeling comfortable, feeling uncomfortable. You could here be also holding on to your defense and deep-seated subconscious mechanisms as perhaps you fear you might find yourself in stressful situations again. And your past experiences and the way that they made you feel and how you survived them have now become your survival tactics. And you often also perhaps could be fearful of moving away from patterns and habits that serve you, as perhaps you don't know any other way of life. And being defensive and on the lookout for judgmental people who might challenge you, perhaps especially your boundaries, and your sense of peace have become a lifestyle. So now you hold on to emotions as this feels safe and familiar. And anything new is, for example, now suspicious because it almost feels too good to be true. So guys, now you can also check out my premium healing site. There's a healing library where you can start to address challenges that you're facing with IBS. And you can find out more at evetterosepremium.com. And here just also quickly points that you can start to explore and ask yourself to understand the reason why this medical condition could be challenging you so much. So your self-esteem. Why do you feel that you don't deserve a better life, better relationships, better friendships, or even a better career? Why do you have such a big fear of setting boundaries? Often you might also revert to anger to set boundaries, but I'm sure that you've noticed that it only causes more problems, and you end up becoming part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So there are some questions for you to digest and to think about. So guys, thank you for all these really great questions, and until next time, be the light that you are.
Hi guys, thank you for joining me, and remember to grab your copy of Metaphysical Anatomy on Amazon, 679 medical ailments. And I also wrote about the psychosomatic root causes of that, and I'm spoiling you because I even added key points for you to start looking at important questions that you can ask yourself to start improving your quality of life. And also remember to catch me on Instagram, Evette Rose, 1 with the digit 1, and Metaphysical Anatomy on our Facebook fan page. Bye guys!